At 7:12 on a Thursday morning, a man named Grant Holloway walked into my gas station, pointed at pump 6, and told me to fill his truck on the HOA account. When I politely told him there was no HOA account and he'd need to pay like everybody else, he stared at me for 3 full seconds, smiled in a way that made my skin crawl, then pulled out his phone and called 911. 24 hours later, that same man had half the neighborhood protesting outside my business, my regional manager threatening my job, and the mayor driving across town to stop what had somehow become the most ridiculous political meltdown our county had seen in years. My name is Ethan Carter, and until all this happened, I thought running a gas station was about fuel, coffee, and lottery tickets. Turns out, sometimes it's about standing your ground when the wrong person mistakes authority for ownership. Before I get into it, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to deal with an HOA dictator who thought the rules applied to everyone except them. Now let me tell you how one demand for free gas turned into a war nobody saw coming. I worked at Pine Creek Fuel and Market, a small station sitting just outside a neighborhood called Oak Valley Estates. Now, if you've never lived near an HOA community, consider yourself lucky. Oak Valley wasn't just any HOA either. It was the kind that fined people for having the wrong flowers, sent warning letters about basketball hoops, and somehow managed to hold emergency meetings over mailbox colors. Most residents hated it, but they kept their heads down because fighting the HOA usually cost more time and money than it was worth. And at the center of all that power sat Grant Holloway. Grant wasn't some retired businessman trying to keep property values up. No, Grant treated the HOA like his own private government. He walked around town with his chest puffed out, always talking about standards and community values, but what he really loved was control. The first time I met him years earlier, he tried convincing me that HOA board members deserved a standing discount because they provided a public service. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. By that Thursday morning, I hadn't seen him in months, and honestly, life had been peaceful. My coworker Rachel was behind the coffee station attempting to fix a machine that should have been retired during the Obama administration. Rachel had a gift for reading people. She could tell who was about to complain before they even opened the door. Around 7 o'clock she glanced out the window and muttered, "Well, that's not good." I looked up. "What?" She pointed toward the parking lot. "Grant Holloway just pulled in." I sighed immediately. "Maybe he just needs gas." Rachel laughed. "And maybe raccoons pay taxes." The black pickup rolled to a stop near pump 6. A few seconds later, the door flew open and out stepped Grant. Polo shirt, expensive sunglasses, HOA logo embroidered on his chest. He looked less like a neighborhood volunteer and more like a guy running for governor of a country with 27 houses. He came inside, carrying himself like he owned the building. "Morning, Ethan. Morning." He slapped his keys onto the counter. "Pump 6, fill it up. HOA account." I blinked. "What HOA account?" His smile faded. "The Oak Valley account." "There isn't one." "Of course there is." "No, sir, there isn't." For a moment he looked genuinely confused, as though reality had made a clerical error. Then his expression hardened. "I'm president of Oak Valley Estates." "Okay." "The HOA spends thousands of dollars supporting local businesses." "Okay, so charge it to the HOA. Or," I replied calmly, "you could pay for the gas." Rachel nearly choked, trying not to laugh. Grant slowly removed his sunglasses. That's when I knew things were about to get stupid. "You know who I am?" he asked. "Unfortunately." Rachel turned around, pretending to organize coffee cups, because she was about 2 seconds away from losing it. Grant leaned closer. "This community depends on cooperation. This gas station depends on customers paying." His jaw tightened. I could practically hear the gears grinding inside his head. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and started recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced dramatically to the camera. "We are witnessing discrimination against Oak Valley residents." I stared at him. A customer buying beef jerky stared at him. Even an old guy near the lottery machine stared at him. Nobody knew what planet he was currently broadcasting from. "Grant," I said, "you just don't want to pay." He ignored me completely. Then came the part none of us expected. He dialed 911 right there, right in front of us. Rachel slowly lowered her coffee pot. The old guy stopped scratching his lottery ticket. Even I thought maybe this was some kind of joke. It wasn't. Grant told dispatch he was being denied essential services and targeted because of his community affiliation. Community affiliation. I swear those were his actual words. When he hung up, he walked outside and stood next to Pump 6 like a man waiting for federal investigators to arrive at a crime scene. Rachel stared through the window. "Please tell me that didn't happen." It happened. Did he really call 911 because you wouldn't give him free gas? Apparently. Rachel rubbed her forehead. "I need stronger coffee." About 15 minutes later, Deputy Marcus Reed arrived. Marcus had worked law enforcement in our county for almost 2 decades. He had the exhausted expression of a man who'd already seen every possible version of human stupidity. He stepped out of his cruiser and immediately spotted Grant waving both arms. From inside the store, we watched the performance unfold. Grant pointed at me, pointed at the pumps, pointed at the sky at one point. I think he even pointed at a squirrel. Finally, Marcus came inside. "Morning, Ethan. Morning. You refusing service?" "Nope. You refusing free service?" "Yep," Marcus nodded. "That makes more sense." Then he walked back outside. We couldn't hear everything, but we didn't need to. 5 minutes later, Grant's face turned bright red. Another minute after that, Marcus handed him a citation. Rachel nearly dropped to the floor laughing. Grant stormed back toward the store. "This isn't over, okay? You'll regret this, okay? The community will hear about this, okay?" He jabbed a finger toward me. "You've made a serious mistake." Then he spun around and marched out. The truck roared away from the pumps. Rachel watched him disappear down the road before turning toward me. "You realize he's going to make this everybody's problem now, right?" I wanted to tell her she was overreacting. I wanted to believe a grown man wouldn't start a war because someone asked him to pay for gasoline. Deep down, though, I knew exactly who Grant Holloway was. And people like Grant never saw consequences as lessons. They saw them as challenges. I finished my shift around noon. Everything seemed normal. Customers came and went. People bought snacks. Life moved on. Then around 2 o'clock, Rachel walked over holding her phone. "You need to see this." My stomach sank immediately. "What now?" She showed me the screen. Grant was live streaming from the entrance of Oak Valley Estates. The video title read, "Local business targets HOA residents." Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, dozens of shares. Grant stood in front of the neighborhood sign delivering what looked like a campaign speech. According to him, I had refused service because I hated homeowners. Apparently, I was attacking community values. Apparently, Pine Creek Fuel represented corporate greed. Apparently, asking someone to pay for gas was now oppression. I watched for 30 seconds before handing the phone back. "You've got to be kidding me." Rachel shook her head. "He's just getting started." She was right. And by the next morning, things would get much, much worse. The next morning, I knew something was wrong before I even got out of my truck. You ever have one of those moments where your stomach starts warning you before your brain catches up? That was me pulling into Pine Creek Fuel and Market at 6:45 on a Friday morning. At first glance, everything looked normal. The pumps were standing where they always stood. The ice freezer was still crooked. The faded store sign was still hanging on by what appeared to be stubbornness alone. Then I noticed the crowd. Across the street, right near the entrance to Oak Valley Estates, stood about 15 people holding signs. Not 1 or 2 people. 15. Some had folding chairs. Some had coffee cups. One woman had brought an umbrella even though the sun wasn't even up yet. And right in the middle of them stood Grant Holloway holding a megaphone like he was leading a revolution. I parked slowly and just stared through my windshield. "No way," I muttered. Rachel pulled into the lot a minute later. She stepped out of her car, took one look across the street, then immediately turned around as if considering driving home. "Tell me I'm hallucinating," she said. "I wish I could." Grant spotted us. Even from that distance, I could see the satisfaction on his face. The man looked happier than I'd ever seen him. Apparently getting told no had become the greatest purpose of his life. We unlocked the store and stepped inside. Less than 30 seconds later, my phone started buzzing, then buzzing again, then again, text messages, Facebook notifications, missed calls. Somebody had tagged our business page in dozens of posts overnight. Rachel opened Facebook and immediately groaned. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Grant's live stream from the previous afternoon had exploded. Thousands of local views, hundreds of comments. The crazy thing was that most people weren't supporting him. They were laughing at him. But Grant either couldn't see that or refused to. In his mind, he had become some kind of neighborhood freedom fighter. At 7:30, the first protesters crossed the street and entered the store. They didn't buy anything. They didn't need gas. They simply walked around filming. One man stood near the soda cooler pretending to compare drinks while holding his phone directly at me. Another woman wandered through the snack aisle narrating everything like she was filming a wildlife documentary. "This is the employee involved in the incident," she whispered dramatically. Rachel leaned toward me. "I swear if she starts talking about mating habits, I'm throwing a bag of chips at her." I almost laughed, but honestly my nerves were shot. By 9 o'clock it felt like we were working inside a zoo exhibit. Every customer seemed to know who I was. Some offered support. Some just wanted gossip. A few wanted selfies because apparently surviving an HOA meltdown made me locally famous. Then things got worse. Around 9:15, a white SUV pulled into the lot. Out stepped 3 men wearing matching polo shirts and carrying clipboards. Their confidence was impressive considering none of them looked qualified to inspect a lemonade stand. They marched into the store like federal agents. The tallest one flashed a badge hanging from a lanyard. "Good morning. We're with the Community Business Accountability Coalition." Rachel blinked. "The what?" "The Community Business Accountability Coalition." "That's not a real thing." The man ignored her. "We're investigating allegations of discriminatory practices." I folded my arms. "Who sent you?" "We received complaints." "From Grant." The silence answered my question. Rachel smiled sweetly. "Okay, before we continue, company policy requires all investigators to complete a verification process." The men exchanged looks. "Verification? Absolutely." She reached under the counter and pulled out a random clipboard she'd grabbed from the office. Her face remained completely serious. "All investigators must perform the official Pine Creek compliance assessment." The shortest man frowned. "What does that involve?" Rachel looked him dead in the eye. "The goose dance." I nearly swallowed my tongue. "The what?" "The goose dance," she repeated. "Flap your arms, honk 3 times, spin in a circle, and march 20 feet. It's federally recommended." The 3 men stared at her. Rachel stared right back. For a terrifying second, I thought one of them might actually try it. Instead, they muttered something about contacting supervisors and practically ran out of the building. The second the door shut, Rachel collapsed against the counter laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. Even I lost it. It was the first time I'd laughed since this whole nightmare started. Unfortunately, the laughter didn't last. At 11 o'clock, my regional manager arrived. His name was Douglas Pierce. Douglas cared about 2 things in life: numbers and avoiding problems. He stormed into the store carrying a stack of printed emails. The expression on his face immediately told me this wasn't a friendly visit. "Ethan." "Morning, Doug." "No, not morning." He slapped the papers onto the counter. "What in God's name is happening here?" I looked at the emails. Complaint after complaint. Most came from Grant's supporters. Some accused us of discrimination. Others claimed hostile business practices. One person accused us of emotional damages because they felt uncomfortable buying gasoline. I wish I were making that up. Doug, I began, this started because Grant wanted free gas. I don't care how it started. Then maybe you should. His face tightened. Rachel quietly backed away because she could see where this was heading. Douglas lowered his voice. Corporate has been calling me since sunrise. The Chamber of Commerce called me. The city called me. Do you understand how much attention this is getting? None of that changes the facts. Facts don't matter when people think you're the problem. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Maybe because part of me knew he believed it. He wasn't concerned about truth. He was concerned about headlines. So what do you want me to do? I asked. Douglas sighed. Make peace. With Grant. I don't care if you buy him flowers. End this. I stared at him. You want me to apologize because he demanded free gas. I want this nightmare off my desk. Then came the threat I'd been dreading. If this continues, I may have to suspend you until things cool down. The room went silent. Rachel looked furious. I felt something shift inside me, fear at first. Then anger, real anger, not because I was being threatened. Because after doing everything right, I was somehow being treated like the villain. Douglas left a few minutes later. The second he walked out, Rachel slammed a box onto the counter. Forget him. I rubbed my face. Easy for you to say. No, Ethan, listen to me. She leaned closer. You've been playing defense since this started. Grant keeps throwing punches because nobody ever punches back. What am I supposed to do? Her eyes narrowed. We expose him. I looked up. Expose what? Everything. She started counting on her fingers. The 911 call, the live stream lies. The HOA complaints, the harassment. The fake investigators, every ridiculous thing he's done. I wanted to dismiss the idea, I really did, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Grant's entire strategy depended on controlling the story. The second people saw the truth, his version fell apart. Rachel lowered her voice. There's something else. What? She smiled. My cousin works at City Hall. I blinked. Seriously? Doing what? Assistant to Mayor Nathan Brooks. Now she had my full attention. Mayor Brooks wasn't the kind of politician who chased publicity. If anything, he avoided drama whenever possible, which meant if Rachel was willing to involve him, she believed this situation had gotten completely out of control. You think he'd care? I asked. Rachel looked out the window toward Grant's growing protest. Once he sees what's happening to a local business, yeah, I think he'll care. We spent the rest of the afternoon gathering everything. Security footage, screenshots, customer statements, the police citation, copies of online posts. By the end of the day, we had enough evidence to fill a small legal office. Around 4 o'clock, the protest somehow got bigger. More signs appeared. More people showed up. Grant had upgraded from handmade posters to professionally printed banners. One read Defend Community RIGHTS. Another read Stop Business Discrimination. Rachel stared at them through the glass. He paid actual money for those, apparently. Imagine being this committed to not paying for gas. The crowd kept growing. Drivers slowed down to watch. Teenagers filmed from bicycles. Somebody brought lawn chairs. At one point I saw a guy eating popcorn while watching the protest like it was a sporting event. The whole thing felt less like activism and more like entertainment. Then around 5:30 Rachel's phone buzzed. She looked down, read the message, slowly smiled. What? I asked. She turned the screen toward me. A text from her cousin. 3 words. He's coming tomorrow. My stomach tightened. The mayor? Rachel nodded. Outside, Grant raised his megaphone and started another speech. Across the parking lot, his supporters cheered. He looked invincible, untouchable, like a man convinced he'd already won. What he didn't know was that tomorrow the audience was about to get a lot bigger. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I had a feeling Grant Holloway was about to discover what happens when the spotlight turns the other direction. By Saturday morning, the protest had transformed into something that barely resembled a neighborhood dispute anymore. It looked like a county fair built entirely around one man's inability to accept the word no. I arrived at Pine Creek Fuel and Market just after 8 and nearly missed the entrance because of the crowd. Cars lined both sides of the road. People stood on sidewalks holding coffee cups. Teenagers were filming videos. Somebody had even set up a folding table with donuts. Across the street, Grant Holloway stood at the center of it, all wearing a pressed blue polo and holding his megaphone like a championship trophy. The crazy part was that I don't think he realized people had stopped showing up to support him. They were showing up to watch him. There is a difference, and it is a dangerous difference when your ego is involved. Rachel was already inside when I arrived. She looked out the window and shook her head. The circus got bigger. Looks that way. How long before Grant starts charging admission? I laughed despite myself. Honestly, it felt good to laugh again. The fear I'd been carrying around for 2 days was slowly being replaced by something else. Determination. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Deep down, I always knew it. The problem was that truth moves slowly while drama travels at the speed of light. Around 10 o'clock, another wave of people arrived. Some carried signs. Others simply wanted a front row seat. Grant climbed onto a small landscaping wall and began another speech. "Businesses must be held accountable," he shouted through the megaphone. A few supporters cheered. Several people rolled their eyes. One guy eating a breakfast burrito yelled, "Pay for your gas." The crowd laughed. Grant pretended not to hear it, then something changed. A black county SUV pulled into the lot. The laughter faded. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Deputy Marcus Reed stepped out first. Calm, relaxed, hands resting on his duty belt. The same look he'd worn when he cited Grant 2 days earlier. Grant immediately marched toward him. "Deputy Reed." Marcus sighed before Grant even reached him. "Morning, Grant. I'm glad you're here. This situation has become unacceptable. It sure has. These business owners continue targeting our community." Marcus glanced toward the store, then back at Grant. "Still talking about the gas." Grant's jaw tightened. "This is bigger than gas." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what worries me." Before Grant could respond, another vehicle pulled in. This one was impossible to ignore. A black city SUV with municipal plates. The crowd immediately went silent. Rachel looked at me through the store window. "Showtime." The driver's door opened. Mayor Nathan Brooks stepped out. He wasn't surrounded by assistants. He wasn't making a grand entrance. He simply walked toward the crowd with the exhausted expression of a man who had better things to do on a Saturday morning. Yet somehow that made him even more intimidating. Grant's confidence visibly grew. He hurried toward the mayor wearing the smile of a man who believed help had finally arrived. "Mayor Brooks," he called, "thank goodness you're here." The mayor stopped walking. "Grant, we've been trying to get attention on this injustice." "Have you?" Grant immediately launched into a dramatic explanation. According to him, Pine Creek Fuel had discriminated against Oak Ridge residents. We had abused customers. We had damaged community trust. We had undermined neighborhood values. The speech went on for several minutes. The crowd listened. Marcus listened. Rachel listened from inside the store. I stood near the doorway watching the whole thing unfold. When Grant finally finished, the mayor looked at him quietly for a moment. Then he asked a single question. "Did you pay for your gas?" The silence was immediate. Grant blinked. "That's not the issue. It's a simple question. The issue is discrimination." "Grant." The mayor's voice remained calm. "Did you pay for your gas?" Grant shifted uncomfortably. The crowd noticed. That's the thing about public meltdowns. Once people sense weakness, they start paying attention to details. "No," Grant admitted. "Because the HOA," the mayor held up a hand. "Thank you." Another silence settled over the crowd. This one felt heavier, more dangerous. Then Mayor Brooks did something nobody expected. He pulled a folder from under his arm. "Before coming here this morning," he said, "I spent several hours reviewing complaints involving Oak Valley Estates." Grant's face changed instantly. "Complaints? Quite a few of them." The mayor opened the folder. threatening homeowners over seasonal decorations, attempting to fine residents for children's sidewalk chalk, issuing warnings over bird feeders, filing complaints about outdoor birthday parties, trying to regulate holiday lights. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Nervous at first, then louder, Grant looked stunned. The mayor wasn't finished. According to city records, there was also an attempt to restrict non-HOA residents from using a public walking trail. More laughter, more whispers. Some people holding protest signs slowly lowered them. And now, the mayor continued, we're here because a local business asked a customer to pay for gasoline. The crowd erupted, not in support of Grant, in amusement. For the first time all weekend, the narrative was slipping away from him. I could see it happening in real time. Grant looked around. His supporters suddenly seemed much less enthusiastic. Several were avoiding eye contact. Others appeared embarrassed. One woman folded her sign and quietly walked toward her car. Rachel leaned beside me and whispered, "He's losing them." She was right. Then came the moment that changed everything. An older man stepped out from the crowd. I recognized him immediately. Harold Benson, one of the longest-serving HOA board members in Oak Valley. Quiet guy, respectful, the kind of person who usually avoided conflict. "Mayor Brooks," Harold said carefully, "there's something people should know." Grant spun toward him. Harold ignored him. "The board never approved this protest." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Grant's face went pale. "That's not true." "It is." Harold straightened his shoulders. "We never voted on any of this." Grant acted alone. More murmurs, more whispers. Suddenly other HOA members started speaking up. One woman admitted she'd been told the gas station refused service entirely. Another said Grant claimed there was a public safety issue. Someone else revealed he described the situation as business corruption. Every statement chipped away at what little credibility he had left. Marcus Reed crossed his arms. "Grant, did you tell people there was a public safety emergency?" Grant hesitated. That hesitation was all anyone needed. The crowd reacted immediately. "Are you serious?" somebody shouted. "You told us there was an investigation," another person yelled. The atmosphere shifted completely. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was a public unraveling. Grant tried to regain control. He climbed back onto the landscaping wall and raised the megaphone. "Listen to me," he shouted. Nobody listened. "This business, pay for your gas," someone yelled again. This time half the crowd laughed. Grant's face turned crimson. "You don't understand." "We understand perfectly," Harold replied. The mayor stepped forward. "Grant Holloway, your actions have wasted public resources, created unnecessary conflict, and damaged trust within your own community." Marcus nodded. "And after reviewing everything, I'm issuing an additional citation related to today's obstruction issues." The crowd gasped. Grant looked like he'd been punched. "You can't do that." Marcus pulled out his citation book. "Actually, I can." For the first time since this started, Grant looked scared. Not angry, not arrogant, scared. Because reality had finally arrived and reality wasn't interested in his version of events. As Marcus completed the citation, Harold cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." Everybody looked toward him. "As acting board representative, I am formally requesting an emergency vote of no confidence in Grant Holloway's leadership." The crowd erupted. Some applauded. Some cheered. Several HOA residents looked relieved, truly relieved, like they'd been waiting years for someone to finally say it out loud. Grant stared at them in disbelief. "You can't be serious." Harold met his gaze. "We're very serious. After everything I've done for this neighborhood." A woman near the front folded her arms. "You fined me because my grandson's bicycle was visible from the street." Another man pointed toward Grant. "You threatened legal action over my garden decorations." Someone else shouted, "You tried to fine me because my garage door was open during a football game." The complaints kept coming, one after another, years of frustration finally spilling into daylight. Grant stood frozen. The crowd he'd spent years controlling had turned against him. And there wasn't a thing he could do about it. A few minutes later, he climbed down from the wall. No speech, no threats, no dramatic final declaration, just silence. He walked toward his truck while cameras followed him from every angle. Before getting inside, he looked back at the crowd, then at the mayor, then at me. For a second, I thought he might say something. Instead, he simply opened the door and drove away. Nobody stopped him. Nobody followed him. They just watched. The truck disappeared around the corner, and with it went the entire protest. It was over, just like that. People began folding chairs, packing coolers, throwing away signs. Conversations shifted to other topics. Life moved on. Marcus stopped by before leaving. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I smiled. "I think so," he nodded. "Good, try to enjoy the rest of your weekend." The mayor approached next. He extended his hand. "Sorry you got dragged into this." I shook it. "Thank you for coming," he smiled slightly. "Sometimes people confuse leadership with control. They aren't the same thing." Then he left. Rachel watched him walk away. "I like him." "Me too." We spent the rest of the day serving actual customers again. No cameras, no speeches, no protest signs, just normal life. Honestly, it felt incredible. Around 4 o'clock, something unexpected happened. A silver sedan pulled into the lot. Rachel noticed it first. I followed her gaze. My stomach tightened immediately. Grant. He stepped out alone, no supporters, no megaphone, no HOA polo shirt, just jeans and a plain jacket. He looked older somehow, smaller, tired. He walked toward the entrance slowly. Rachel stood beside me like she was preparing for impact. Grant stopped at the counter. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Then he cleared his throat. "Ethan." "Grant." He nodded awkwardly. "I came to apologize." If he'd announced he was moving to Mars, I couldn't have been more surprised. He stared down at the counter. "I let things get out of hand." Rachel quietly moved away, giving us space. Grant took a long breath. "Truth is, when people stop listening to you, it feels like you're losing control. I spent so many years telling myself I was protecting the community that eventually I stopped noticing when I became the problem. I didn't say anything. I just listened." "What happened wasn't your fault," he continued. "You were doing your job. I was embarrassed. Then I got angry. Then I doubled down because admitting I was wrong felt worse than continuing." He pulled an envelope from his pocket and set it on the counter. "That's a signed withdrawal of every complaint I've filed." I looked at the envelope, then back at him. "Thank you," he nodded once. "I don't expect forgiveness." "That's fair." A small smile appeared on his face, sad but genuine. "For what it's worth, you were right." Then he turned and walked away. No drama, no speech, no audience, just a man finally facing the consequences of his own choices. Rachel waited until he was gone before speaking. "Well," she said softly, "that wasn't the ending I expected." "Me neither." We closed the store that evening under a sky painted orange and gold. For the first time in days, the parking lot felt peaceful. The fight had never really been about gasoline. It wasn't even about the HOA. It was about power. About what happens when someone gets so used to getting their way that they mistake resistance for disrespect. And maybe that's why this whole thing stuck with me. Because sooner or later, everybody gets told no. The question is what happens next. Do you accept it, learn from it, move on? Or do you burn down your reputation trying to prove you're still in charge? Grant made his choice. Then he paid the price. But I'd love to know what you think. Was Grant treated fairly, or did the town go too far once the truth came out? Have you ever dealt with someone who couldn't handle being told no? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications because trust me, in towns with HOAs, there's always another story waiting around the corner.